Welcome to Her Drive, the podcast where we explore the unmarked roads to success, heart-centered leadership, and the unfiltered stories that really shape the women that come on the show. I'm your host, Cynthia Cremblett, and today we have an absolute powerhouse guest joining us. Her name is Lena Nasserdeen. Hello, Nada. How are you?
I'm very good, Cynthia. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your show today.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And for those who are listening, I want to provide a little bit of background, and then we'll hear from Netta to explain, really the juice of her story and her work. So just to inform you all, Netta is the founder and CEO of Rise Up For You, a globally recognized thought leader, TEDx speaker, and a two-time #1 best-selling author. Her latest book, which I can't wait to dive into, is called Emotional Intelligence: The Path to Fulfillment, Influence, and Greater Success. So that's just a bit of the juicy. With that, I really want to get back into talking with Netta. Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
What is new, fresh, and exciting for you right now?
New, fresh, and exciting. The sun is up in Las Vegas, so I'm super excited about that. It's beautiful here. That's where I'm tuning in from. But really, 2025 is moving really fast right now, but there's a lot of abundance that's happening. We've been able to bring on new team members, expand our impact, and that's always new and exciting. Just launched the book. You can see it behind me. For those of you that are listening, the Emotional Intelligence book, and it hit #1 bestseller before it was like really officially launched. So those are some new and exciting things. And we have 3 more books coming out this year as well. So we're excited.
I love it. So juicy. And when you say the year is has been really busy and is moving fast, I hear you. I think that's something that's really impacting the collective.
Yeah.
I'm not alone here. Well, beautiful. Well, let's dive into the most recent book that's been published. And I would love to hear a bit more about the other 3 that you have coming down the pipeline.
Thanks. So just to back up a little bit, Cynthia, as you mentioned, I run a company called Rise Up For You. And essentially what we do is we work with entrepreneurs, leaders, organizations around the world, not just in the US, and we help them enhance their performance, their leadership, and really their workplace through soft skills. And oftentimes people they don't know exactly what a soft skill is. It's basically all the human skills that we think are common sense that aren't, that make up about 80% of your success. One of the top soft skills that is super critical to anyone building a healthy, abundant life in every area, not just in their career, is emotional and social intelligence. Emotional and social intelligence in itself makes up 80% of your success. You can be the smartest person in the room. You can have 1,000,000 degrees. You can have all these things, but if you don't have the ability to have self-confidence to take action, manage your emotions, influence people with your communication, display empathy and active listening, your success is only going to go so far. And so we've recognized that this is a massive skill that's needed for organizations and leaders. And so we just launched the book, Emotional and Social Intelligence. And what I love about the book is that it's twofold. It's a book that's empowering around these skills and why they're important. But I would say 85% of it is pen to paper, because what people don't recognize is that soft skills are just like going to the gym. Every single day, you have to exercise it in the moment when you're triggered. You know what I'm saying? So when you're sitting across from somebody and they say something that triggers you or gives you an emotion, that's when these skills are important to come in of, okay, what's my response? How am I going to manage myself? How am I going to influence my communication versus just reacting? And so this book is very comprehensive. All of our clients use it when we do coaching and training with them. And it's a great way to truly tap into your potential as a whole human being, because I'm a firm believer that you can have it all, but you have to build certain skills, soft skills being the most important, to build a life where you're abundant in your career, also with your health, also with your mindset, with your money. I mean, you name it.
Yeah, sure. That all makes perfect sense. And I appreciate the background a little bit on what your company does. And I'm curious, what are some of the most common emotional and social blind spots that you find with the people you work with?
The biggest challenge that we see for professionals, in fact, 83% of professionals say this is their #1 challenge, is self-confidence. And I can talk about self-confidence all day long. The first book that I wrote that's behind me with my face is all on self-confidence, because There's so many leaders, there's so many entrepreneurs, there's so many amazing people that no matter what success they build, they don't feel enough, right? Or they struggle with perfectionist mindset, they struggle with imposter syndrome, they struggle with self-doubt. And we all have self-doubt, but they struggle with it to the point that it impacts their ability to take action. It cripples them. And so that's the number one challenge that we see, but it's also a skill that most people don't identify as the problem, right? They don't real like they say, oh well, I procrastinate. Okay, but that's a behavior. Why do you procrastinate, right? Or I struggle to make time for myself. That's the behavior, right? Is not making the time for yourself. There's always the belief or the why behind it. So I always say, like, your behaviors tell me what your belief system is, because I can tell by how somebody moves, how they talk, how they interact with people, what's going on up here in their mind. And it always traces back to the self belief and self confidence.
So interesting. And I love that you can find those deeper layers of what's going on. And that's what I do with my own work in a different format with people. So I'm curious, are there any small steps, initial steps that someone can take first when they identify, oh, this is a self confidence challenge? Where can they move from that first point of identifying to then like starting to work on it?
Yeah. So the first thing that I say is that it's really important for you to assess yourself. You got to ask yourself, like, where am I not confident? What's happening? So, like, we've built a confidence quiz. It's totally free. Anybody can take it if you go to our website. And there's 9 areas that we call them, like the confidence crushers or the confidence elevators, right? So they either crush your confidence or they elevate your confidence if you do it right. So I would say the first thing is, let's identify the areas that you are strong in and the areas that you need more support in, so that we can truly understand what areas of confidence are lacking. So, for example, just to name a few, trusting your intuition is a part of confidence, right? Setting healthy boundaries is a part of confidence, because if you're not setting healthy boundaries, you usually have a people pleasing mentality, which breaks and crushes your confidence. Perfectionist mindset. I always say perfectionism prevents you from your potential and it creates procrastination, right? And so it's identifying, like, what are the things right now that are hindering and impacting your self-confidence, and why, getting to the core root of why. So we have a simple strategy. It's actually not simple, but it's the best strategy that we have, and it takes a lot of work, and it's called the 4 B's to reverse engineering. So every single person has negative thoughts, including myself. We all have self doubt. So we're not saying you should never have negative thoughts or doubt. That's just not realistic. But what we are saying is, how do we manage it so that instead of sabotaging you, it serves you, right? How do we manage the belief so that it doesn't impact your behaviors in a negative way, but that it drives your behaviors in a positive way? So the first B is just understanding what's the limiting belief that you have. We all have thousands. Just pick one. What's one limiting belief that you have right now that's getting in the way of your success, right? Relationships, money, whatever it is. The second B is, what's the backstory? See, because all of us are an accumulation of beliefs from other people that we've accumulated through our childhood, through our teachers, our past leaders, our relationships. We are like one big vessel of all the experiences that we have lived up until this point. Most of the beliefs that we have in our mind were projected onto us by other people that also struggled with self confidence, right? And so we are walking around with all of these things in our mind. When somebody said, you're not good enough, you're fat, you're ugly, who said you can have this job? And we held on to those beliefs. And so it's important for us to understand, what's the backstory of the belief. Did this belief come from a former leader that was threatened by me? Did this belief come from a teacher when I was in, 12 years old? Did this belief come from when I was in middle school and I was being bullied? Where did this belief come from? The third B is what we call the behavior. It's understanding, what is the behavior that is being caused because of the belief that I have. So this is really, really important. If I have a belief, for example, that I'm not enough or I don't know what I'm doing, is it causing you not to raise your hand in a meeting and ask a question? Is it causing you not to stick up for yourself to your partner that's potentially abusive? Is it causing you not to take action even though you have all the skills and you know what you need to do? There's always a behavior that happens, and we need to know what that behavior is so that you can build that self awareness around how the beliefs are impacting you. And then the last B is the breaking. How do you break the belief so that you can shift the behavior in a positive way to serve you versus sabotage you?
Beautiful. I love that process. And I can see how it would take time to really find the rhythm and move through all of those things. As you know,
Yeah.
growth and healing takes time. And I know so many of us who are type A doers want to have the solution immediately and not really go into the depths of why we are the way that we are, or at least we're showing up. So I appreciate you breaking it down. And I'm very curious to gather perhaps a personal story from you in regards to figuring out this formula and how it has served you to identify ways to elevate in emotional intelligence, social intelligence, etc.
Yeah. So it's interesting because everything that you go through leads you to where you are. You just don't realize it in the moment. So before I built this company, I used to be a performer. I toured internationally around the world, and I was a singer and a dancer, and I did musical theater. That's what I did. And I realized it was like the first time I had this epiphany that it doesn't matter how good of a singer or dancer I am. There's got to be more to deciding who's going to move forward faster. Right. So when I first started performing, there were hundreds of performers in the room that all sang and danced really, really well, but only 36 people could get on a tour. And so that's when I realized that, okay, it's more than just my technique. It's more than my degree. It's more than my ability to like belt out a song. How am I going to be one of the 36 to get chosen?
Mm,
And I realized that, okay, well, I have to show up with confidence. I have to like take power when I get on the stage. I have to look people in the eye when I'm singing and connect with them. See all of the emotional social intelligence. I didn't know it was called that in the moment, but I knew that, okay, these are the things that aren't happening with these other amazing singers. I'm going to try this. And every single tour I got casted on for like the next 7 years. Then fast forward, when I was 27, I became an executive of an education corporation, and I saw the exact same thing happening. I had 200 team members under me, master's degrees, PhDs, you name it, but they were getting in the way of their own success. So they were coming to work every day feeling unfulfilled. They were on autopilot. They had a hard time growing in their career because all they had to their name was a degree. They didn't cultivate their ability to build relationships with people, to lead, to manage conflict, to have conscious conversation. And so it impacted their success, not only personally, but professionally in both aspects. And then I went through my own personal journey. So I understood that there was a gap. I could see there was a gap in these skills. And my way of making an impact was just contributing as a leader in the organization that I worked for as an executive, teaching at the college. That was my way of giving back. And then I went through my own experience. I decided to resign from the company as an executive and from the college. I sold my house. I had a house on the lake, brand new luxury car, all these toys, kayaks, you name it. And I sold everything and I moved out of the country for an opportunity called marriage. On the first day of our honeymoon, my husband said he wanted a divorce. So I thought I was being pranked. I literally lost everything in like a day,
wow.
right? Couple weeks. So I went from a six-figure executive to $100 and two luggage. That was it. And I got back on a plane. I was confused. I was distraught. I was in shock. I did not understand what just happened. I just got married. And then on the first day of the honeymoon, he's like, hey, I want a divorce. Like, I literally thought I was in a game show. And I was crying so bad on the plane that my father came to me in my dream. My father died when I was 27 years old. And he said, Netta, everything you need is already inside of you. You just have to rise up for you. That's the name of the company today. That's the name of the book that I wrote, the first book. So I came back to California and I said, I don't know anything about business. I know nothing about entrepreneurship. I don't even know what a flippin' podcast is. But all I know is that I need to create something called Rise Up For You. That's all I knew.
Mm,
So I started creating, just started with like a website. I started putting things on social media about like empowerment because that's the place that I was in, right? I was like, just got to empower myself and uplift myself and get back up. I had no money, nothing, like literally living off of a credit card. I had like a 700, an 80 credit score. And in a month, it was like 500, right? Nothing to my name. And then 4 months later, my second parent, my mother, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer out of nowhere. So now I'm in the lowest point of my life and it just got lower. So I'm building Rise Up for You out of a hospital. I take showers at the 24-hour fitness. I go back to the hospital, open up a laptop, sit next to my mom. What do people need in the world? Who's Tony Robbins? How do you build a podcast? Like, what's training and coaching? How do you make money as an entrepreneur? I just start researching. 9 months later, my mother passed away. I'm 31. I just turned 32. I just buried my second parent. I have nothing to my name, and my heart is broken from this divorce that I can't comprehend and process.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the soft skills that I'm talking about, predominantly self confidence, I was able to look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, all of these things don't define me. What can I control?
Mm-hmm.
And do I believe in myself? And the question and the answer was simple. It was like, yes, no one's going to come to my house on the door and knock on the door and be like, hey, we got you. Here's money. Here's your house back. No one's going to do that. So in that moment, I had to use the strategies that we now teach all over the world to rebuild myself, built the company. Today, we're a 7-figure company. We're in over 50 countries. I have an amazing team throughout North America, and it's still growing and going.
I think that is such a empowering story to hear, and I think it speaks to something that seems to be innate within you, which is confidence. And I'm curious, where do you think the confidence stems from, and then perhaps how is it fortified through time so that you could look at yourself in the mirror and say, yes, I do believe in myself. I do have confidence.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So here's the great thing. Anybody could build self-confidence. We teach it every day. And some people have one step ahead because of the childhood that they are born into. I was born into a family that did not have a lot of money. I come from a Middle Eastern family. I'm Lebanese. My dad came here with $20 in his pocket, $0, and he just grinded it out and tried to build a life. Him and my mom always struggled with money to put food on the table. Like we didn't come from money, but what they did have was a tenacity. They had a belief in their ability and they had a lot of love. And so my brothers and I were born into a family where during the most critical time as you're in your adolescence as a child, they taught us to love ourselves. They never put us down. They taught us that we were enough. They taught us affirmations. And so even though we didn't have money, mom and dad were always like, who said you can't do that? Who told you that you're not good enough? Like they were constantly putting that in our brain when our brain was developing at the most crucial point.
Yeah.
So then by the time, I got into high school and I had a teacher tell me I was stupid, my brain was already developed from my parents where I said, I'm not stupid. And you're a teacher. You can't tell me that. Like I already knew better. Right. And then I went through all of these challenges getting older. But because my parents set such a strong foundation of self love and love from the family, when all of these naysayers came at me and when people tore me down and ripped me up, and the same with my brothers and I, we already had such a strong foundation from our parents that we were wise enough to decipher what was their belief and what actually belonged to us. And so the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of people that are listening that are parents, they're moms, right? Maybe some dads. And if you have kids, this is the time to teach them to love themselves and to be confident in themselves, because then when they get older, they're going to have a strong foundation where when somebody does push them down or put them down or tell them that they're not good enough, they already have a strong core inside of them to say, yeah, that's not me. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And to keep growing and building from it.
That's so stunning. And this is kind of a sidebar, but I've spent a lot of time with people of Lebanese heritage, and there just seems to be something about that culture specifically, where there's a tenacity that I've not seen in other diaspora around the world. So I think it's just interesting to hear that from you. And I wanted to share that with you. It's really beautiful. And I
Thank
love
you.
that you had parents that instilled such strength within you.
Thank
With
you.
that being said, yeah, you're welcome. If you could go back in time and give a younger Netta some words of wisdom, what age would you go and what would you say?
That's a really good question. If I could go back in time, I would probably go back to like my 21 to 24 years old, 20, yeah, 20 to 24 years old. Because going along with building self confidence, sometimes you don't realize that it took me a while to understand that everybody has their own journey. And so my parents always raised us that if you can do it, like there's the word failure or I can't doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a long time, I wasn't empathetic towards people that said, like, I can't do it or that didn't show up as their best. I was like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, get your ish together, right? Like, what is the problem? And like, no excuse mattered to me. I'm like, I don't care what's happening in your life, just like freaking make it work. And now I realize that that's not really realistic because most people don't tick that way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that are hindering people from moving forward. And so the better strategy is to be empathetic, not necessarily release expectation, but just have an understanding of like why this is happening, why this behavior exists, how can we support you, and how do we push your potential to get you to a certain level. Where I would say when I was younger in my performing days, I was a little more ruthless.
Mm-hmm. That's quite interesting to hear. And for those folks who are listening who perhaps self-identify with the blocks or the phrase "I can't," what would be just like some juicy nutrients that could be poured on them in the moment of like to maybe just shift a little bit, to shift that mindset slightly?
Yeah, I think it's the concept of fixed versus growth mindset.
Mm,
Fixed mindset is a mindset of I don't know this skill and I can
mhm,
never learn this skill. Like I was born this way and that's it. That's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is I'm an evolving human being that can learn. I can learn, I can grow. I don't have to stay as this exact person. So I always say instead of living in the I can't period, right? I can't period,
mm,
living in the I can't comma, but I can figure it out,
mm,
or I don't know this right now, comma, but if you give me a little bit of time, I can learn it.
sure.
And I think that is the most important. It's all reframing in the language, or I don't know this, but I'm willing to learn it if
Yeah.
it's important, right? So I think it's that language that's really important. But when you live in the I can't period, you
Mm.
put yourself in a box.
Yeah, that's my own personal anecdote with that is I can't is really not within my framework. I had a mother who I call a Swiss Army knife of women. And I always wanted to be like my mom. I'm like, I want to have a tool for everything. I want to just like be capable. So with that, I put myself in many situations in my life where I did have to just kind of figure it out. And it has built a lot of self confidence. And even though I've ended up in a relationship that was very emotionally depleting and highly abusive, I still had this resiliency basket of in my own life experience that I would look at and see, oh, I'm an empowered person in these other areas. I can become empowered to get out of this and do whatever is necessary. And so I love just the shifting of the phrasing and the mindset just a
Mhm,
little bit, right?
mhm, mhm.
Allowing, encouraging people to build up their resiliency basket, as I like to call it. And would love to know sort of what is something that, how do I want to phrase this? What is something that people who are trying to grow their leadership abilities also most often have misunderstandings around in regards to what it takes to be a leader or what success actually is and how to reach whatever they define success as?
Yeah, and I think you pretty much said, Cynthia, is I think that we have a very warped definition of what success is.
Mm,
Very isolated. You
mm,
know, I hear people all the time that are like, "Oh, they're so successful." And I'm like, why? Because they have a great job? Are they kind? Do they have healthy relationships? Do they take care of their health? So I think the first thing is understanding, like, what does it really mean to be successful? And I know this was an epiphany that I had when my parents died, because I'm the only girl in the family. So when I lost my mom, I was cleaning out her closet and she left me all of her stuff, like her jewelry, her Louis Vuitton bags. But in that moment, I had a meltdown because I said to myself, like, this is not success. Like, what does it mean to live a life that I'm proud of? And what does it truly mean to build success? And what is success encompassing of? Well, it's my personal belief and the belief of the company Rise Up For You that success is your self confidence, your career, your romantic relationships, your health, right? And that includes mind, body, soul, the relationships that you have in the community with people, and the money tree, right? If you can build a whole life where those are really nurtured, that's success. So I think that's the first thing as a leader, is understanding what does it truly mean to build success and what does that mean for you. But the biggest thing that we see with leaders is they always want to point the finger and start with the team. I can't tell you how many people come to us and they're like, hey, we need training for our leaders and we need them to learn how to manage and coach their team. And I say, no, no, no. What you need them to do is build personal leadership first, because I can guarantee you that more than half of your leaders aren't doing what they ask their team to do. They're not having conscious conversations. They're afraid of conflict. They're struggling with self confidence. And so their behaviors are representative of that. They're not making time to empower, influence, and coach their team. Like, it starts with the self first. You can't give what you don't have. And so whenever people come to us and they're like, we need leadership training, we always say, great, we're going to start all the way back up to the front with self awareness first. And we have to explain that to them. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love that so much. I had chills while you were talking because there's so many beautiful moments in my life where I've leadership where they were empowered and they could pour from a cup that was just naturally overflowing. And then there's, I think many of us had the experience when it's the alternate, and then I don't. For me, I'm like, oh, I don't respect this person's leadership, so that impacts how I show up, and then there can be a lot of toxicity that forms in the environment. So I love that your company understands the importance of like being an empowered leader and not, you mentioned conscious conversations.
Yeah.
Having conscious conversations, I think first starts with inner dialogue that is conscious, right?
Yes.
And I'm just curious what your definition of conscious conversations is.
Conscious conversation for me is having the tough, uncomfortable conversations that most leaders do not want to have. I mean, I cannot tell you, Cynthia, how many times people avoid conversation. They just, it's a communication thing. They're afraid to do it. And so they would rather fire somebody than have a conversation with them that says, these are the things that we're seeing. How can we support you? Or even on the opposite side of a leader of, I'm a leader in this role and I don't know the answer to this. Does anybody else on the team know it? Can you support me? So I think conscious conversations is on both sides. It's being able to elicit trust by being transparent as a leader on where some of your gaps are, but then also being able to have uncomfortable conversations for the betterment and the growth of the team member and the company. And for some reason, and it goes again, it all goes back to confidence, is that a lot of times conscious conversations is connected to conflict. And so anytime there's a conversation that might not be positive, people think it's conflict and they don't want to have that conversation. And so again, I can't tell you how many leaders we have that would rather just fire somebody than pull them in the office and say, hey, let's talk about how we can elevate this performance, because here's what we're seeing, here's what I'd like to see, and here's how I'm going to help you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Well, that was a beautiful definition and display of what it can look like when it goes right or unfortunately does not happen. I'm curious, for those who are wanting to cultivate better conscious conversations, are there any type of daily practices that or rituals that they can bring into their life, either at home and or at work, to just create a more enriching experience and build that skill?
Yeah, so I'll give two. I think the first one is that, like, every leader, every person, entrepreneur, I don't care who you are, you need to commit to space and silence in your life. Just start there, because you can't be conscious if you're always in an unconscious state of autopilot. And the way that you become conscious is creating more space in your life so that you can actually hear yourself think, so that you have time with yourself to reflect and think about Bobby Jane or Joe, whoever your team member is, and give yourself space and silence to ask some questions of, okay, I'm noticing this in them. Maybe why am I noticing this? What do I think is the best action step? So you have to be able to have conversations with yourself in order to have any kind of conscious conversation with anybody else. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say that's a little bit more practical and tangible is get a coach. And I mean that because you need to be able to practice these conversations. Because some of us, like, I do this every day. And even now, if I need to have a conversation with a team member that's a little bit more critical or not as positive, I still talk to myself in the mirror as if I'm talking to them. And I practice what I'm going to say so that I can hear myself out loud to make sure that I'm not breaking any communication boundaries, such as saying, you do this, you do that. I listen to myself that I can say, let's reframe this in a different way that's forward thinking, right?
Mm,
Or what we call forward feedback. So a coach is really helpful. I have a coach and I run a coaching and training company because it's good to have these conversations and do role play so that when you're in the moment, you have the language. Most individuals struggle with language in the moment. And so then the things that come out of their mouth, like take them in an opposite direction. It doesn't serve them because they just say whatever's on their mind and they don't actually like intentionally think about how they're going to say it and how they're going to deliver it.
that is all so juicy. And I think many times the nervous system just hijacks the brain and the heart
Yeah.
and all of the things. So even if we might have great intentions, it comes out all jumbled and wrong.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you say also, I have a coach because I think it's perfect for anyone in any position, no matter what you're doing for work, to have a healthy sounding board who knows your intentions, knows your heart, knows your goals, and can provide you feedback. And yeah, I think that takes a lot of bravery because, in my experience with many people in leadership, they think that it may be a sign of weakness to have external help. When in reality, I think the strongest people are those who are willing to reach for help, guidance, support, etc.
Yeah. Well, every leader has outside pressures that nobody knows about. And so that's why it's important to have a coach because, for example, I'll use myself. I'm a leader in this company that I run, Rise Up For You. I'm also the owner of the company. So there's times where my leadership is not the greatest because the business mindset comes in and I'm trying to make payroll and I need you to perform. Do you see what I mean? And so I need to have a coach to help just bring those in and for me to bounce things off of to say, I want to be a great leader. I want to be empathetic. I want to be kind. But at the same time, like we're trying to scale, we're trying to make more impact. I have payroll, there's people that I'm responsible for. Now, if you look in the corporate side of things, it's the same thing. You might have a leader that is tasked to lead and guide you, but
Yeah.
you don't know if the CEO is breathing down their neck and like, hey, you have to hit your benchmarks and your ROI. And we're not like, there's always other things that are impacting our ability to show up. And you need to have a sounding board or a coach that can help you reframe that so that you can show up as your best. And that's just the reality for everyone.
That's so powerful to hear. Thank you for sharing. And if the listeners could take away one thing from this conversation that you think would be the juiciest, most impact on their lives right now, what would you like that to be?
Commit to your growth like you commit to your job or anything else that you do. Most people are interested in growing themselves, and interested is not an action, interested is a thought. A lot of people want these things in life. They want healthy relationships, they want money, they want a booming career, but they're not actually committed to doing the work to make that happen. And when I say committed to doing the work, I'm talking about the soft skills. Research shows it makes up 80% of your success. And the data backs it up. And the most successful people in the world have a high level of soft skills. And there's no arguing that. If you find yourself stuck, if you find yourself in a position where you're like, I know what I'm doing, I'm good at my job, I've gotten all these degrees, I'm making money, but I still feel fill in the blank, most probably you haven't committed in the true growth, which is the self confidence, the emotional intelligence, your ability to lead, and the influential communication that help you make an impact in the world.
So beautiful. I appreciate that share. And where can the audience find you, find Rise Up for you, get their hands on your latest book?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking, Cynthia. So the company is Rise Up For You, completely spelled out. We're all over social media at that handle, at Rise Up For You. We have the YouTube, we have podcasts, LinkedIn, Instagram, you name it. I really encourage you to go to riseupforyou.com. And right at the top, there's a tab that says free resources. When you click on it, there's a free confidence quiz, there's a free emotional intelligence quiz, and then there's free courses that back up those quizzes. So I encourage you to take the quiz first, and then when you get your score, you can watch the course and like build the skills that you need based off of your quiz. And it's all completely free. And then you can connect with me, Lena Nasserdeen, on LinkedIn and Instagram. I do my own social media. So if you send me a message, I will respond to you.
I love that. That's so rare. And I'm glad that now everyone has different ways to connect with you, your team, and your work. And I wanted to circle back to this before we say bye, because I mentioned it in the beginning, and that is wanting to talk about the books that are upcoming to be published. Do you mind touching on them for a moment?
No, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, we have the four critical soft skills: the self confidence, emotional intelligence, transformative leadership, and influential communication. Those are the most important skills that we all need. So, the emotional intelligence book launched in April. We'll have the self confidence book. In July will be the transformational leadership versus transactional. And then in December will be the influential communication book. And all of the books will be empowering, educational, but also a place to execute. So pen to paper, going through the strategies, going through the exercises. The emotional intelligence book that you see behind me is almost 350 pages. And I would say about
Mm, that's beautiful. And I will say this to the audience. I started doing conscious work at like the age of 20. And I would read the books, I would do some of the exercises, but it wasn't until I was in my mid 20s, like 26, 27, that I actually started committing to doing the prompts fully in all of the books. And I'll never forget the first one that I did that with. It was Think and Grow Rich for
yep,
Women
yep.
by Sharon Lechter. And I have this whole formula tattooed on my arm in white ink that she wrote out in the book. And then I actually met her the week on accident somehow, like not by an accident, through divine intervention. I met her. And it was through that book and the commitment to doing all of these prompts and exercises that I started to see true transformation. It wasn't just, as Netta has said, just a thought and like ingesting information, but it was actually creating output and shifting my mindset, shifting my behavior. So when you do acquire these books, I highly recommend that you commit to doing it, because that's in my opinion where the transformation really comes from. And I'm very excited to see what you all have coming down the pipeline and use it for my own growth.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, Netta, is there anything else that you would like to share before we close out?
I would just say, I always end with this: the greatest tragedy is wasted human potential. Do
Mm,
not let that be your story.
yeah. Wow. I want to pause for that. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you, Netta, for being here. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
You're welcome. And for my guests, please visit all of the websites. Of course, in the show notes, there will be links. And as always, I ask that you share this with anyone whose heart you think it would touch. And please leave a review so that other folks can find the show. Thanks and love you all.